Hey guys, we're back with one of my pre-YouTube builds. We're taking a look back at the legioss armo soldier, also known in the United States as the robotech alpha fighter. And let's take a look at some of it in action so you'll know where it came from.
Scramble to leave the Invid hive, the patrol of returning Invid personnel carriers converges on the fortress. Here they come. I seem to be kind of popular around here. A nice trip, fellas. This place is huge. It must go under the whole mountain range. This must be the central power core for the fortress. Uh-oh, looks like company. The party's just beginning. That looks interesting. I thought so. The main control matrix. I've got to blow that panel. With any luck, I can kill two birds with one stone.
Control matrix breached. Weapons furnace overload. Lucky for us, they left the back door open.
But not for long. Hurry!
Talk about a close call.
Phew. Come on, Scott. Another dead end and I'm a dead duck. With that fireball on my tail, I can't even think about turning around and going back the way I came. That bulkhead's 6 meters thick, and I've just got one salvo of missiles left. Well, Scott, old boy, I guess this is it. It's make it or break it time.
Okay guys, now that you've gotten a little taste of what the final chapter of the Robotech saga was all about, let's take a look at this kit. This is a very interesting kit as it is from the early 80s, and so it is limited by the 80s technology that was available at the time. But one interesting thing about the instruction booklet, if you look here, they show it completely pre-painted, which is very unusual. Full color images of the model actually painted up before assembly. Now, being a early 80s kit, you will note that if you painted it before assembly and then just assembled it right off the trees, you're gonna have a lot of seam lines, and I mean a lot. It really needs to have all of the seams worked before painting, and then you can partially assemble it in sub-assemblies and start the paint work on it. Because other than that, you're gonna have seam lines all over this kit, which are really not gonna look too good. What I did was I primed all the parts and then started working all the seam lines to make them as smooth as possible before giving all the sub-assemblies a final coat of paint. Here's a really good example. You can see the part on the left has already been sanded and filled. The part on the right, you can see the seam line that goes right across the joint on the leg. That wouldn't have looked too good had I assembled it that way. Another issue I had with this kit was that the nose cone that resides on the mech's back when it transforms into the armo soldier had a huge hole in it from where the mold didn't apparently get injected with enough plastic, and once I put it together there was a huge gap there. So what I had to do was just fill it with putty and reshape the entire nose cone so that it had a nice symmetrical look on both sides and gave the original shape of the part. Now it's starting to come together. I've got the upper torso, the arms and the head installed, and I'm starting a little bit of panel lining, and then I start working on the legs and the lower torso. Even for a kid of its age, It had a lot of rich details which are just begging for some panel lining to be brought out, and really added a lot to the build. This is a good example of what I was speaking about earlier, as if you would have painted it and just assembled it, you can see where it had a really nasty seam line going right across the front of the leg. Then came time for my favorite part of this build. That was going to be all the weathering and battle damage that I was going to put on this thing, as I really wanted it to look worn and beaten without being totally destroyed. So I started doing all of the chip work all over the body. As you can see here, I added all the chipping to the paint, and then I started scraping the paint off where I thought the thing would have made the most contact with outside objects, such as on the feet, the legs, the hands, the arms, and just really making it look like it's been through some action. This kit had an amazing amount of decals for a kit of its size. Unfortunately, being 30-year-old decals, they weren't going to really work very well. So what I did was I just made my own by scanning them into my computer, printing them out, and then I had a whole new set of decals which I could apply to the kit. I then applied the decals, and there were a lot of them, to all the parts on the surfaces of the kit, and after applying them, I started to scrape them up a little bit. I mean, we can't really have spanking new signage and livery all over this thing with the amount of battle damage that I was going to put on it. Now comes the time to add some dirt. I'm using the Tamiya weathering powders at this point, and I'm adding rust, I'm adding soot, grime, and all over the body just to really dirty it up. I mean, with all the chipping going on, you can't expect it to remain clean, can you? Here you can see some rust on all the edges where the bare metal is exposed. Here you see some of the decals which are chipped off, and dirt and rust and grime are applied to it. This was, I gotta say, one of my favorite parts of this build. Now, this was an articulated kit from the 80s, which is nothing compared to the way the kits are now. If you see BG's latest build of Starscream, there you can see what real articulation is. This is, well, it was good for the 80s, but the technology now has gone so far beyond what they could do back then that it's not even comparable. Well guys, that's it for a look back at one of my older builds. This really was a fun kit to build. Yes, it is limited by the technology of the day, but it was still fun to build. And now you see the exact size of the thing. It is tiny, but in that tiny small size, they managed to pack quite a bit. Alright guys, that's it for this one, and I will see you on the next one.